Hi everyone, Angela Rojas here. Hope everyone is having a good weekend. I haven't given any updates to some of the actions I've been taking, and I'm still waiting for responses. So over the past few weeks I've been writing. I've written a couple of emails or letters to the Department for Education, and separately I've written to the Classification Office. Now this is in regards to one, teacher resources, and also with the Classification Office it's around a teacher resource book from Shine SA. First, we'll go through the Department for Education. So I wrote them a letter and I sent it to the Minister's office too, and he forwarded it to the Classification Department for Education. So we'll start there. So looking back at the Freedom of Information requests that were done, that took months, by the way, to receive those, and a lot of it came redacted. But through that we were able to confirm the Amaze videos. They did confirm those. So what I did was I had a look at the Amaze videos on their website. These ones were on puberty and sex, obviously, but mainly that, but it's supposed to be age appropriate. And I know that these videos, well, because they're a YouTube, but I know that teacher resource videos have not been classified by the Australian Classification Board, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I had a look at those videos and I gave a really quick assessment on a few of those videos, and I wrote back to the Department for Education giving an example under themes with the crude humour, and for one video an example for sex classification, and that was the sexual activity on masturbation, and then the third one was on nudity, the sexual arousal being depicted in there. And so for the video that was on puberty, that particular video would come roughly to an M rating on the crude humour, because they make crude humour about ejaculation. That would be an M rating. The second video example was on masturbation. So masturbation, totally normal, and it shows the boy masturbating under the sheets. Now that would be, it's very discreet, but it's also would be sitting around an M rating as well. Classification. And the last one, it's just on sex and sexual health or something, and it shows a depiction of a male erection. It's cartoony, but it's still R-rated because mitigation factors, so factors that would decrease the impact normally or decrease the rating, they do not apply in video games, and in film classification. So educational merit and the stylization, those sorts of things that would normally lower the impact don't when there's male erection, or not just male erection, sexual arousal depicted with nudity. It will be automatically R-rated. So, and there's a lady that I met who has membership to Shine SA for the library, and when she went there a few weeks ago to have a look, and she asked the librarian about the DVDs, because what she noticed was that pretty much none of the DVDs had any consumer advice on the covers. And she asked the librarian about that, and the librarian at the Shine SA library told her that because they're educational, they're not required to be classified. So I'm going to unpack this, and it's going to sound technical, but I have to. Because teachers are under the assumption, or the department, that anything that's educational does not need to be classified. To a degree, it is true, but under the National Classifications, Publication Films and Computer Games Act 1995, under Section Division 1, Exempt Films and Exempt Computer Games, Section 6B, Exempt Films and Exempt Computer Games 1, subject to subsection 3, a film, so they have tables, that a list of types of reasons why they don't need to be classified. So educational merit, if it's got medical, scientific basis, whatever, they can be exempt. However, section 3, however, a film or computer game is not an exempt film or game if it contains D, material that would likely cause the film or game to be classified M or a higher classification. So any of your teacher resource videos, and I'm educating the educators now as a classifier, any of your teacher resource videos that is likely to be rated, if classified, M rating and above, must be classified by the classification board. The exemption doesn't apply. It only applies if the classification rating is below an M, a G or a PG. And also keep in mind, I mean, with students, especially primary school age students who are under 13, you need to gain parental guardian consent if they're under 13, if it's PG. So this is why I like the idea of opting children out or giving out permission slips. And that's the reason why parents, when your child school watches a video for fun day, you must give them parental guardian consent on a regular movie because the film has been classified. They don't do this because teacher resource videos have not been classified. So I wrote a letter explaining that, and I asked proof. To be certain, I asked for a list of educational videos that are used in the sex and relationships part of the program. As a classifier, I'd like to see their classification certificates. And if they haven't been classified, I was more than happy to check the database and check on their behalf. Well, I pretty much got a letter back from the Department for Education. It took over a month, but we got there. Pretty much saying that, thanks for your concern, blah, blah, blah. Talked about how, there's full transparency and parents have the right to write in writing if they don't want their child to participate in any of those activities. Well, the thing is, I've spoken to a lot of parents over the past couple of years, and a lot of parents have told me that when they have approached their child's school with concerns, they are told it's mandatory. Well, it's not mandatory. It's maybe mandatory for the teachers to teach because it's part of the curriculum, but it's not mandatory for the students to not participate if there's certain areas of that curriculum you don't want them to participate in. And the other thing too is, so the concern is if they're showing primary school age students M, MA and R rated equivalent videos, that's where my concern is. And there are ways around that they can teach the curriculum content, and it doesn't have to be so graphic. So, and the other thing too was that freedom of information, a lot of it came back redacted or out of scope. And initially it was refused. So because of the copyright laws, they wanted to, why would they send out, they didn't want to send out the information because of the copyright laws. So, and then they redacted it. So what have you got to hide? It's not like I'm going to reproduce and make money off of your teacher resource. So, mind you, if I was to ask, my children's school teachers for some resources for their math or history or science, I'm sure you would give it to me. But because it's, sex and relationships, you've got a lot more to hide from that. So I wrote back, explaining, gave my examples on the classification. Also, I'd like to know, and I sent them the YouTube terms of use, which says that it says who may use the service under that section. Age requirement: you must be at least 13 years old to use the server. However, children of all ages may use the service, and YouTube Kids, where available, if enabled by parent or legal guardian, permission by parent or guardian. So if you work for a school, if you're a teacher listening to this, you need to gain parental guardian consent to show YouTube videos if the child is under 13, just so you know. And I also gave an example of a book. I spoke about it a while back. The book's called Icebreaker. Just a quick recap. This book, a teacher showed me this book. It was, the teacher worked at Roma Mitchell College. It was in the Student Resource Centre. It has very strong coarse language and very detailed sex scenes. The teacher described it as 50 Shades of Grey equivalent. And if you look at the publishing recommendations, the publisher's recommendations for this book, it says that Icebreaker contains 18 plus content, and it's not recommended for persons under 18. So how does a book like that end up in the Student Resource Centre? Well, teachers and teacher librarians don't order particular books. They do a standing book order, and the distributors pre-select books in packs. Librarians don't catalogue books anymore. They add books to their collections. Cataloguing is done in publishing. It's called cataloguing in publishing. So I'm not putting, I'm not blaming anyone, but that's, the distributor should know any better. Very rarely would a school library select or order one particular book for students. The teacher resources are different. They normally keep their resources, at behind the library where students can't get to it. They normally have a section for those. So I'm waiting to receive a response back. I gave my examples as a classifier, wrote down the concerns, and recommended that teacher resources, especially the unclassified videos, that they get submitted for classification review or a proper assessment. And I've recommended that, they give parents the option to opt their children out, or permission slips, just like when we went to school. That's what, we used to, I remember, giving my parents permission slips and they used to sign it. So, and a lot of parents don't know that they can opt their children out. I'm not saying that you have to opt out from everything, but that's your choice on how you want to teach your child about sex and relationships according to your values. And you know your children and what they're emotionally and mentally ready for. And what I do know about the curriculum, I'll put it in comparison terms. When I was in year 9 and 10, what I learnt in year 9 and 10, they are teaching kids in years 5 and 6. That is the difference. So, and a lot more. And a lot more. They go into, it's not just biology, anatomy and physiology anymore. It goes into sexual pleasure and all sorts of sexually explicit behaviour. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you updated on whatever response I get. The other one, okay, so to the Department for the Classification Board, there was a book from China Say, so that had, and I went through it on a video a little while back, and it goes into good sex and bad sex. This book is on the China Say Teacher Resource Catalogue. Now, the Department for Education in South Australia have said that this book has never been in a South Australian school. I'm going to have to take them on their word for that, even though it still remains on their teacher resource catalogue. So I don't know if they can actually guarantee it hasn't, but the section that was really concerning, the bad sex. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as bad sex. It's sexual violence. The book goes into sex with children is wrong, and it gives this one here. So, well, sex with children is called pedophilia. It's not sex with children, just to make that clear. And under the classification guidelines, any sexual activity involving minors should be refused classification, especially when it's pedophilia. This one shows an image of a man with his hands between the boy's legs, and the description says about the picture: the man is touching the boy between his legs. He is rubbing his penis. The boy is scared. He doesn't like it. That's not bad sex. That's pedophilia. The other one, and then I also mentioned in the letter, again, because I wrote to them initially and they wrote back, and this is the second time I'm writing, but I've also mentioned that this book also has, with the bad sex, again, not bad sex, sexual violence, rape, has a section on, it shows a depiction of a man raping a woman, and there's also a depiction in this book about incest. They don't call it incest, by the way. They said sex with family members is against the law. Well, that's incest. And it gives a depiction of a boy or an uncle or father, that's what it says on there, with his pants down facing the girl. That should never be in a book. So even if it's not shown, I can't see how it has any educational merit. I can't see how it's justifiable. There was another book, another Shine Essay teacher resource book. Now this book goes into sex and the law, and he actually shows different examples about sexual activity that's against the law. Well, that's sexual violence. Again, it's not sex in the law, it's sexual violence. But they do mention, it goes into, rape or underage sex or whatever, but this one mentions that sexual activity with animals is against the law. Well, hello? Of course it is. Do they really need to mention that? And there's another section in that book that talks about sexting, porn, and sex work. Do children really need to know about sexting, porn, and sex work? Under sexual themes classification, references to sex work, fetishes, or kinks start at an M rating or higher. Under sexual violence, references or depictions start with a classification of M rating or higher. That is 15 and above. And it depends on how discreet it is. So this is my question. And this is what I wrote in the letter to the classification director, board director. In what capacity does sex work, porn, sexting, bestiality, rape, incest, and pedophilia have educational merit? Because on the classifying point of view with film and games, it starts at an M rating, and that's if it's discreetly shown or mentioned. So how can they, it has to be, can it really be justified to teach? Why? Why bring up sexual violence? And, there's that question again on, there might be students, we don't know, who have had experienced sexual violence or some sort of violence. They might be triggered, and we don't know. You can't take a whole school approach in a safe way. And it's not just, we don't know what's happening in their own home. We don't know if it's student. It might trigger some people. And that's where I say, why not just stick to basic biology and leave it up to the parents? It doesn't have to be taken as a whole school approach. And then you've got the activism side of the, education side. That's a whole next level thing. The social justices, it's not just in health. It goes through every lesson almost. There's some form of social justice that keeps coming up time and time again. But anyway, back to the classification. The other thing I mentioned is an incorrect classification decision. So a couple of years ago, a book from the book series The Boys Omnibus. It also has a film adaptation. Now these books are graphic novels. A few years ago, that these books were classified. They were given the same classification rating as the film adaptation. 3 of them came back category 1, which is an R rating. One of those books, the book titled Herogasm, has a depiction of bestiality, where a dog is mounting on a woman. There's full nudity, and there's a bunch of people around cheering as it's depicted, cheering and smiling. Now, in the film adaptation, the bestiality is very discreetly implied. You don't see it. You just it's there. But in the it would never be allowed in film and game. So whoever and in the publications, under the Publications Act guidelines, bestiality should never be realistically depicted, which it is, by the way, because the body parts of the characters are in proportion, and it should never be glorified, which they are because the characters are cheering and smiling. It should be refused classification. Now, I don't like the idea of book banning, but it should never be allowed in a book. So I'm doing what I can as a classifier and assessor for film and games to try my hardest to, do what we can with the books. Because the boys, a few years ago, I don't know, I probably mentioned it a while back in my talks, when I found out that these books came back R-rated, or 3 of them, I was able to get them out of our public libraries, because being a category 1, they must be wrapped and sealed. They cannot be on public display where minors can get easy access to them. The books before that, for a few years, were sitting in the graphic novels area right next to your Superman comic books, unrestricted. So, it took a while, took a bit of writing, reminding the public library services of South Australia that, it's, it is against the law to have a category 1 book in a public place. They didn't write back, but they did remove all the copies. But I think it's still available for sale. But anyway, but that's just an example of, and I think over the last few years, I think the classification board members, I think they get new board members every time there's a new government. Even with the classification training, the accreditation lasts for 3 years, and then you need to renew. The accreditation that I have allows me to work in-house with production team. So in a couple of years, when I get to my 3-year mark, I would need to redo the training again. It's not something that lasts forever, because it's always something that always changes. And last year there was a bit of a reform, so there was a few little changes that happened, and that was around games and around the gambling side. So you'll always have to keep updating. But I'm doing what I can as a classifier and I'm waiting for a response now. It's they seem to be disregarding the rules that are written there. And the director of the board can, with a book that had, those concerns, the teacher resource one, the one that had the pedophilia and the incest, he has the power to call in a book for classification review. He can, it would cause a gazette to be issued if it's, because it would be a submittable publication. Normally with publications, it's, distributors are the ones that are responsible, but he does have the power to do that. And it's very clear. If he comes back and turns around and says, well, there's educational merit on pedophilia, then I don't know what to say. I don't think so. I think, I'm just going to release the outcome. I'm going to wait for the response. There's only so much I can do. So I'm just sharing the actions I've taken. I'll give you guys an update on it. If anything, I'm just bringing things to your awareness. With the teacher resources I spoke about, I don't know what year levels, what schools have been taught or spoken about with what I mentioned. As a parent, you need to go to your children's school, and if you have any concerns, ask them. Ask them to see the content if you have any issues. And if they're a good school and good teacher, they'll sit with you and they'll go through the content with you. They might not post it out because of the copyright laws, and that's fine. I know Sarah Game is going to put out a bill that she's working on to for transparency, because parents are the primary educators, and they need to be the ones that make the primary decisions on those sorts of experiences. I'll say learning experiences, because I've got a fairly good idea of what the type of lessons are being taught, and it's not what people think. So I think you need to talk to, and I don't think every school takes the same approach to teaching these subjects. So be polite, be respectful to the teachers, sit down and start that conversation off if you have concerns. And, you can always send me a private message if you have any questions, and if I can try to answer them. If you go to the link in my bio, there's a tree link with an email address. You can contact me there and I can try to help. Now, in a couple of weeks, I will be talking on Radio Italiana Adelaide, Wednesday the 11th, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And a week after that, on the 21st, I'll be in Perth. Be joining Rachel Reed and Tess Hackett, and it's going to be an awesome event, protecting the innocence of children for church and state event. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'll be releasing something soon for anyone that's in Western Australia or Perth that would like to come along. There'll be a discount code coming out when you buy your tickets. I'll be giving that out soon, but keep an eye out on my page, and look, I'll keep everyone updated on how I go with those two departments. It's not unreasonable to want classification on videos. It's not unreasonable to want transparency, and it's not unreasonable for parents to be given the option to opt out, because I think there's a lot of parents that just don't know how to ask, and schools are not being as transparent as what they claim they are. That freedom of information was enough to prove that. Anyway, hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend, and until next time, bye guys.